Let's assess and break down your wrist movement. The first part to minimizing, preventing, or relieving wrist pain or even elbow pain is understanding how the wrist moves the hand. So we want the wrist to be able to go through radial and ulnar deviation and flexion and extension. If you don't know what those are, keep watching because we're going to break it down. So if we can put all of those articulations of the wrist together with a controlled articular rotation or CAR, then we can start to understand the functionality of the wrist and then begin to improve mobility in the areas that need improvement. So let's break that wrist CAR down and assess the way our wrists are moving. So you're going to need a ball, something like a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, something you can squeeze in your hand that's not going to be too small where the fingers are overlapping, right? We want to be able to squeeze so that we get a lot of tension in the forearm and the hand. And then we also are going to need something like a yoga block. This is going to be to block the forearm from moving while we move through and from the wrist. So you can also use a table or a bench, something that's going to be able to isolate that forearm for you. And the last thing we'll need is a stick or a dowel, broomstick, even a light dumbbell will work so that we can isolate the radial and ulnar deviations. So let's get started with flexion and extension first. You could put your ball to the side. I want you to see wrist movement with the hand open before we go into squeezing that ball. So we're going to take our yoga block and you're going to take your right wrist and your right forearm and place it on the yoga block with the palm facing up. This is supination. So this is supination from the elbow and from the wrist. So we're in a supinated position and we're going to go through flexion and extension. So with your palm open, I want you to kind of close those fingers. So try not to splay them too much. And I want you to think of keeping your palm nice and flat. Think of your palm and your hand as being one cohesive unit. It's now a steel hand. So as we bend from the wrist, the fingers are not going to deviate from the hand. So you're going to take your left hand and you're going to press down on that right forearm so that as we go through this movement, the forearm is not going to add to that movement from the wrist. So we're going to add some tension here so that we're isolating movement from the wrist only. And then we can go into our flexion and extension. So in wrist extension, we're going to drop those fingers towards the floor. This is our wrist extension. Any type of floor work that we do on the hands, push-ups, this is going to be really important that we own this range of motion so we can do push-ups and hand balancing without pain or even getting to and from the floor. So now let's go into wrist flexion, which is going to be pointing the fingers up, but try not to curl those fingers in. Okay, this is when you think of big bulgy forearms, that's that wrist flexion right there. And then we'll go back to wrist extension. We're just going to try 3. Now this is all active range of motion. We're not stretching into any of these ranges of motion today. We're just actively exploring how far we can control and what ranges of motion we own. And rest. And we can use that information once we know which aspects of our wrist mobility we may need to improve a little bit. So let's go with that left arm. Once again, we are supinated. We're going to press into that forearm, open hand, and let's go into extension first. Drop those fingers down. Keep that hand like a nice solid piece and pointing up without curling. And let's go 2 more times. We're going to move slowly and with control. It's okay if you can't supinate all the way. You could even lean your body into it a little bit more so you can supinate more from that elbow and wrist. But it doesn't need to be that perfect position. You just want to make sure that the fingers are going up towards the forearm, wherever that direction may be. And we'll go 1 more time into extension. Fingers are reaching down towards the floor. And flexion, fingers are reaching up. So with extension, you're going to feel the tissues in the front of the forearm working. And for flexion, you're going to feel the tissues in the back part of the forearm working to make that movement happen. So let's grab our ball now, and we're going to do the same flexion and extension, but this time in a different orientation. So now instead of supination, we're going to be in pronation. This amount of pronation is also difficult to achieve. So if it's not all the way there, you can lean to the side a little bit or work in a less than 90-degree angle. All right, so we're gonna lock that forearm into place and we'll go into flexion and extension again. So now you're squeezing that ball, and that's gonna add tension to the hand and the forearm so that we can bring more activation to these articulations. So let's go into flexion first. You're gonna reach those knuckles down towards the floor. And again, we're moving slow and with control. If you're hitting your block, you can slide the forearm forward a little bit more, and then extension, lifting the ball and those knuckles away from the floor. And let's go 2 more times into flexion and extension. And last one into flexion and extension. My veins are already popping out, getting that pump. And rest. Let's go to the other side. The left arm, we're gonna go into pronation, locking that pronation into place. And we're gonna squeeze that ball nice and tight. And let's go into flexion first, reaching those knuckles down towards the floor, bending as far as you can actively go. As you're going, try to keep contact with all 5 fingers and that palm on the ball. And then let's go into extension, lifting those knuckles away from the floor. Once again, this arm is locking this forearm into place so that we don't allow the forearm to help the wrist move. And 2 more into flexion, isolating, and into extension. Keep squeezing the ball. And 1 more time, flexion. You'll notice that one wrist, this may be easier than the other, and that's totally normal. Especially if you're right-handed or left-handed, one side, that right side or left side is probably going to be stronger than the other. And rest. Okay, so that's our flexion and extension. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, even in this orientation. Extension, fingers are reaching towards the forearm. Flexion, think forearm curl, flexing. So now let's get to the other part, radial and ulnar deviation. All you need to really think about is the thumb and the little finger. So radial deviation is turning those fingers or the knuckles towards the thumb side, right? The radius crosses over the ulna as you pronate. So the radius is always right here. It ends right here on the thumb side of the wrist, and the ulna always ends right here on the pinky side. Even when we're pronated this way, this is the radius, this is the ulna. So if I'm in radial deviation, I'm pointing my fingers towards that thumb side. And then if I'm in ulnar deviation, I'm pointing the fingers towards the little finger side. Thumb, little finger, thumb, little finger. Even in this direction, thumb, little finger, thumb, little finger. So one thing you want to make sure and watch out for in these deviations is adding flexion or extension to those deviations, right? These ones are much smaller ranges of motion. And so the wrist is going to want to cheat a little bit to get a little bit more deviation this way. The wrist is usually going to extend up here. We want to make sure, once again, that hand is a nice steel piece and we are deviating on a flat surface, right? All right, so let's grab that block again. We'll do open hand first, and let's go with supination. So we have thumb side, pinky side. Lock that forearm into place, keep that hand open. And let's go thumb side first. This is gonna barely move, okay? Very small range of motion. Now let's go pinky side. This one's gonna be much easier. That's not just you, that's everyone. And again, over to the thumb and point those fingers to the pinky side. 1 more time, over to the thumb. Actively trying to get those fingers further over, and pinky side. Release, and then let's try that on the left. Locking that forearm into place, open that hand. Let's go to the thumb side first, really small movement. And then pinky side. Easier. Then the harder one, thumb side. Don't let that forearm move. Don't let those fingers curl or that wrist rotate. Pinky side. And 1 more time, thumb side and pinky side. And release. So let's grab that ball again. Now we're going to do pronation. So palm is going to face down, and we're going to go through those deviations again. Locking that forearm into place in this pronated position. Squeeze that ball nice and tight. You want your veins popping out. We're going to go to the thumb side first and hold. Keep squeezing the ball. And pinky side. And hold. And thumb side, once again, make sure those knuckles are not reaching up towards the ceiling. And pinky side, make sure those knuckles are not drooping down towards the floor. One more of each. Hold. And hold, really isolating that wrist movement. Release the tension, and let's try that on the left. Lock that forearm into place, pronation. Okay, squeezing that ball, we're gonna go to our radial deviation first. The radius comes over here on that thumb side. And then we'll go to ulnar deviation. The ulna comes over to this little finger side. And thumb side. And little finger side. One more time. Isolating from the wrist. And switch. Squeeze and rest. So that's pretty much it. Before we put it all together, we're going to grab our stick or dowel or light dumbbell, and we're going to do more of this radial and ulnar deviation with a little more feedback. So you're going to grab your stick, and we're going to do this with an extended arm. Okay, so first we're going to do pronation, then supination. You're going to grab your stick right in the middle as long as you can keep it balanced out in front of you. So you may need to choke out to the right just a little bit if you're using that right hand. So we're going to reach that right arm out in front of you. The wrist is going to be right in front of the shoulder. Now the upper arm, the shoulder is going to stay down, the elbow is going to stay straight, and those knuckles are going to point straight ahead. So now when we do these deviations, we're going to get a little more feedback from the stick. So go ahead, thumb side is going to reach forward, right? That's our ulnar deviation. The fingers are pointing up towards that little finger. And then we'll do our radial deviation. Now the pinky side of the stick is going to reach forward. Try not to let those knuckles come up. And then to the other side. And switch. So if the stick starts tilting, then you know that you are rotating that wrist or flexing and extending. One more time. And that shoulder might also be getting tired. And switch. Fingers are turning towards that radial side. And rest. Let's stick with the right side. We're going to tire out the shoulder a little bit, but we're going to do supination. So now the palm's going to face up. Reach that stick out in front of you. Make sure that the stick is not drooping down or making that wrist droop down. We're going to have some wrist flexion throughout this. Let's go thumb side of the stick forward. Now try to move slowly and with control. Pinky side of that stick forward. Very small, very slow. Thumb side of the stick forward. And pinky side of the stick forward. Try not to let that wrist droop. One more time, thumb side of the stick forward. And pinky side of the stick forward. And rest. We're also challenging the shoulder stability, and we're challenging keeping that wrist in isolation from the forearm. So now that we don't have that opposite arm holding that forearm in place, can we achieve the same isolation? So let's go with that left hand, grabbing the stick, reaching out, starting with that pronation. Let's go thumb side of the stick forward first. Keep that stick parallel to the ground. Wrist is going to stay right in front of the shoulder. Pinky side of the stick forward and hold. Thumb side of the stick forward and hold. And pinky side of the stick forward and hold. One more time. Now, if you experience any pain during any of these movements, you're not going to push through that pain. You're going to go right up to just before you start to feel that pain, and that's where you're going to squeeze even harder and hold that position. So we never push through pain. We go just up until it and try to strengthen that range of motion. Hopefully that would allow us then to progress into further ranges of motion without pain. Now let's flip it over into supination. Palm is going to be up. Reach that stick out in front, elbows nice and straight. Let's go thumb side of the stick forward first. Don't let that stick droop. And pinky side of the stick forward. This one's very small. And again, thumb side of the stick forward. So because gravity is trying to pull that stick and your wrist into extension down towards the floor, we're working some isometric flexion of that wrist. One more time. Thumb side of the stick forward, try to hold on, squeeze the stick, just like the ball. We're squeezing all 5 fingers and that palm to the stick the entire time, and rest. So we'll come back to our yoga block and our ball, and we're gonna put it all together for our wrist car. We're gonna go 2 in each direction with each orientation. So grab the ball in your right hand. We're gonna imagine that our fingers and our hand is the end of a marker, and we're gonna draw a big circle around. So we want this to be nice and smooth and circular as much as possible. We're gonna notice which parts of the circle maybe are a little sticky and we have to kind of, it turns into a little oval, right? So we're gonna notice all of that as we go through it. Let's start with our supinated grip. So palm is gonna face up, squeeze the block, make sure that forearm is locked into place, and let's start with our ulnar deviation. The fingertips are going to point towards the pinky side. So we're going to go to the side as far as you can go, and then draw around into wrist extension, reaching for the floor. Then we're going to go around into our radial deviation to the other side, and up to flexion, curling. One more time in that direction. Make it nice and smooth as you can. The more you practice these, the smoother they'll get, the more you'll notice about that wrist movement. You can also train these moves as well. Let's reverse it. So you can train your cars by creating more blocks or adding external load or adding other orientations of the body to those controlled articular rotations and challenging the joint to move in all of its articulations from a different orientation or with 10 pounds added to it. And rest. Now let's switch sides. We'll go with that left wrist, squeezing the ball, forearm faces the ceiling. We're going to go to that, once again, ulnar deviation first towards the little finger, down towards the floor into extension, all the way around, and back up, moving nice and slow. Once again, squeezing that ball so that we can bring more tension to this movement, more activation of the tissues involved with this wrist movement. And then we'll reverse that, going towards the thumb, down towards the floor into that extension, around, keep squeezing, curl that wrist in. So don't just pass over that flexion, curl that wrist in. Last one, down towards the floor, around to curl and rest. Now let's do the same thing, but the palm is going to face down. We'll go into our pronation. Locking that forearm into place, we're going to go into extension first. So let's lift the knuckles up towards the ceiling. Then let's go out towards that little finger first. And down into flexion, curl that wrist. If you need a little more space, slide the back of that wrist away from you. One more in this direction, nice and slow and smooth. Keep that forearm locked into place. Down towards flexion. Here's where this starts to happen usually, right? We start to supinate that wrist as we come into that radial deviation. Try not to let that forearm rotate to come back up. Now let's reverse it, going into radial deviation first, or over towards the thumb and down towards the floor. Keep that forearm locked into place all the way up and in, down, around. Cars are also a really great warm-up and rest. So these are really great if you're a rotational athlete and you're throwing, or even before you're doing some heavy lifting. All right, so now palm is facing down. Let's go over towards that ulnar deviation first, little finger, and then curl down into flexion, around, and back up. And again, and down, around. Squeeze as you come back to extension. And now reverse, going in, down. Don't let that wrist rotate here. And back up. One more time. In and down, around, and back up. And release. So we're trying to keep tension throughout that entire movement. If you don't have your block or your ball, you can do this just by holding that wrist in place. You could have the hand open or squeeze your fist nice and tight. So you could do these anywhere. You don't actually need any equipment, but it helps to feel that tension and that isolation of the hand moving from the wrist. I hope you learned something about your wrist movement today. If you have questions about any of this, drop them in the comments below. If you found this helpful, please share, like, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.